The T-34 is a Soviet medium tank developed at the turn of the 1930s and 1940s. At the time of its creation, it was one of the best medium tanks, combining good mobility, armor, and firepower. Innovative was the use of bout armor, which, together with cast parts, provided relatively good ballistic protection, while the production processes were simple and cheap. It was used during the Second World War and was still a widespread weapon of many countries during the beginning of the Cold War. During the war, the design gained great recognition among the Germans as well, and based on their experience with this type, they were inspired to create a similar design for their Panther medium tank. After the first experiences from the battles in the Spanish Civil War, where the Soviet tanks BT and T-26 proved to be insufficiently armored against the current anti-tank weapons, the command of the tank troops of the Red Army requested the preparation of new tanks with increased armor protection. In October 1937, CHTZ Kharkovskij Tankový Zavod was entrusted with the development of a new tank, which should replace the tanks of the BT series. Chief designer A. Firstov was arrested and executed during this period, the height of Stalin's Great Terror. The young designer Mikhail Kokin, author of the successful T-111 prototype, was entrusted with the management of the design office. Kokin was instructed in detail by his superiors that a new crawler tank was being sought. He was aware of the design limitations of tracked tanks. Thus, in addition to the tracked construction derived from BT tanks on the chassis of the modified American patent of J.W. Christie, the prototype of which was designated A-20, he also developed a variant with a purely tracked chassis, which he called A-32. The main advantage of the more massive construction of the A-32 tank was that it could be equipped with stronger armor and heavier equipment, including better armament, in the future. In 1938, he demonstrated both constructions before the committee of the USSR Defense Council. The A-32 type was immediately criticized mainly by Marshals Voroshilov and Kulik. In particular, Kulik was furious that the designer had even dared to offer a non-coil version and incompetently condemned the new construction in advance. However, in the final decision, Stalin suggested that both prototypes be admitted to the tests. The A-32 tank, renamed the T-32, could therefore continue. A difficult journey awaited him because it was Kulik who was later appointed as the chairman of the commission for assessing the capability of both types. The first two tanks of the T-30 for 76th type were produced in January 1940. Their first tests were very successful, although over time certain shortcomings began to manifest themselves in the above-average rapid wear of some parts, which led to another stoppage of production in March 1940, when Kulik ordered cancellation of production and development of another, new tank. His decision was eventually overturned, but there was still another loss of time. Nevertheless, the Red Army received about 1,225 T-34 tanks by the start of Operation Barbarossa, a formidable force. Version of the tank is T-34 57, T-34 76, T-34 85. The prototypes of the T-34 tank, built in January 1940, according to the engineers, were supposed to be tested similar to the prototypes of the KV-1 tanks during the Winter War, but it ended too soon before they could join the actions. Thus, the first combat deployment awaited the T-34 tanks only after the start of Operation Barbarossa. The first documented action of T-34 tanks is a successful counterstrike by one battalion of the 34th Tank Division near the Sand River on June 22, 1941. However, the success of this action was rather rare at that time. Despite the fact that the T-34 tanks had an overwhelming superiority over any German tank of the time, their formations were practically completely wiped out in the first 2 to 3 weeks of the war, which had several reasons. The first was the lack of training of the tank crews. Both absolute, the level of training was generally very low in the Red Army, and also caused by the fact that the crews did not have time to get used to the machines. In addition, the first batches of these tanks suffered from a significant failure rate, which can be said about all new types of tanks in general. The gearboxes were the first to fail. Logistics was a big problem. In this respect, it was mainly a consequence of the incompetence and dilettantism of the architects of the Red Army, especially Marshals Kulik and Voroshilov, who systematically neglected the entire logistics section. This fact manifested itself worst in the case of tank troops, for which the corresponding capacities of warehouses, tankers, and supply vehicles were not built, and the towing service then practically did not exist. The whole thing was aggravated by the fact that the T-34 tank was at the beginning of the war. Thanks for watching. For more videos, give me like and sub.